What's going on, guys? Luke Innes here. I don't have a review for you today, but what I am going to do is go from worst to first on the George Romero Living Dead movies, the zombie movies of George Romero and the remakes. I'm not going to be including any unofficial titles. Obviously, the first three movies all have unofficial sequels of one form or another. I'm just doing the 6 movies directed by George Romero and the 3 official remakes of those movies. I'm not going to be going into like Day of the Dead 2 or Return of the Living Dead or anything like that. Just the 9 movies that are legit and approved. It's a really difficult one as well, dude, I've got to say. I mean, the problem is that 2 of the movies are in my top 10. One of them's in my top 5 movies of all time. The other one's in my top 10, and the third one's probably in my top 20. And there's a bunch of really good movies in this series. So why don't we get down with it?
Okay, so just got this bit of paper here to cover up the first movie on the list. Let's get on with it. And the bottom one, by far, is the Day of the Dead remake. Yeah, terrible movie. Awful practical effects, really bad CGI as well, really disrespectful to the original, has very little to do with it, but uses all the same character names. The acting's bad, everything about this movie's bad, the gravity-defying zombies and all sorts of other terribleness. This is a really, really awful movie. Day of the Dead did not deserve to be mistreated like that, like it was in this remake. So yeah, Day of the Dead is the absolute worst. Next worst, and this one's okay. This is an okay movie. This is Survival of the Dead. This is the last of the George Romero directed movies. The trouble is this movie just feels very generic. This is a very generic zombie movie. Doesn't have that usual flair that a Romero movie, to me, should have. There was some good gore in it, but with all of the later Romero directed entries, there is some CGI issues. You know, he's taken a bit of an interest in putting CGI into his movies, and it just doesn't always work. Very seldom does it work. So yeah, Survival of the Dead is second from bottom. So that's number 8. And at number 7 is the Dawn of the Dead remake. Now I know that this is a bit of a fan favourite. And to be fair, it is the only film Zack Snyder ever made that was watchable, as far as the ones that I've seen. But yeah, no, it's a terrible movie. Well, not terrible, but I think it's a terrible remake of Dawn of the Dead. It's a really good movie in its own right, but it's a terrible remake of Dawn of the Dead. It's, aside from the fact it's in a shopping mall, it's got nothing to do with the original Dawn of the Dead. As I say, as a standalone zombie film, it's fine, and I would say that it's a really good movie, but because it's just so it totally disregards the original movie. It barely counts to me. But a good movie in its own right. As I say, this is the only movie Zack Snyder ever made that was watchable. And it is a good movie in as much as you know, I enjoyed the film for what it was. It's just that I love the original so much that this just felt really disrespectful to me. Not so much so as Day of the Dead. At least this had the decency to change the names of the characters when the characters were nothing like what they were in the original. So yeah, that's number 7 is Dawn of the Dead. Number 6 would be Land of the Dead. Now a lot of people say that this is the better of the later ones. It's okay. I quite liked it. Dennis Hopper's really cool in it. We're getting into the territory of with the remake of Dawn as well. We're getting into really good film territory. Obviously the Dawn would be higher. It is better than Land of the Dead, but it's, you know, obviously Dawn is ripping on a much better film quite poorly if you sort of think about it. So Land, Dennis Hopper was great in this one. I really like the story. The whole thing about them being in like this compound, that this, you know, citadel that's been built up from nothing, and trying to keep the zombies out. And the zombies are crazy in this one. They get like, you get into like swimming zombies, and there's zombies with machine guns and shit. So yeah, cool movie, Land of the Dead. Next up, Diary of the Dead. This is my favourite of the latter George Romero movies. Of the 6 that he made, the 3 21st century ones, this is my favourite. It feels like the most inventive. To me, it feels like the one that's got the most to say. Obviously, we all know that social commentary was an important part of the Romero movies. I'm not overall a big fan of found footage, but I definitely think in the hands of a director like Romero, who is a master, good things can be done with it, and I think he did a good one this time. If I had a criticism, there is some slightly rubbish CGI, and the social commentary element is very heavy-handed. That would be the other problem with Diary. But other than that, it's a pretty cool movie. Number 4, the Night of the Living Dead remake from 1990. This was directed by Tom Savini. And yeah, it's a really cool, faithful adaptation of the original. It does go to lengths to try and solve some of the problems that the original had, which I kind of appreciate about it. It's a slightly different take on the same story. You know, it's got a lot of respect and integrity for the original, unlike the other two remakes. This is, yeah, a really, really good film. Some great zombie action. Obviously, being directed by Tom Savini, the effects are incredible. And yeah, I really like the 1990 version of Night of the Living Dead. Number 3 is the original Day of the Dead. Yeah, this is, as I said, probably in my top 20 films of all time. I love this movie. It's superb. Obviously, Joe Pilato as Captain Rhodes is brilliant in this movie. The acting is you know, bordering on pantomime in how extreme it is. There's a real pressure cooker atmosphere to this film. I really like it. From the point of view of how well it's made, this is probably the best made of the Romero zombie movies, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the best. Obviously, you know, there's two I prefer more, but Day of the Dead is at number 3. At number 2, Night of the Living Dead, the original 1960s, the greatest public domain film of all time, one of the best films of all time. Like I say, this is in my top 10 movies of all time. It's superb, it's innovative, it's gripping, it's scary. I think actually Night of the Living Dead is the scariest movie out of all these that I've shown. I think that it's just got such a great atmosphere. Awesome movie. That's my number 2 on this list. And my number 1, of course, is Dawn of the Dead. How could it not be? This is, as I say, in my top 5 movies of all time, an incredible film. This is like the Citizen Kane of horror, in a way. It's, you know, an epic story over 2 hours, almost 2.5 hours of social commentary, terror, black comedy, extreme violence. Yeah, this is an awesome film. Dawn of the Dead's incredible. If you haven't seen Dawn of the Dead, do yourself a favour. Pick up a copy and watch it. I mean, I'm guessing if you're watching this, you've probably seen Dawn of the Dead, but you know, if you haven't, what are you doing? This is an incredible movie. You need to see it. I think everyone, even people who aren't into horror, need to see this. It's an incredible movie. I love it. So yeah, that is my worst to first of the George Romero zombie movies. There will be a link to my podcast in the description, as always, with my videos. But other than that, peace.